Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Celtic Way morning briefing. I'm Tony Haggerty at Haggerty 10. It's Monday, the 14th of July, summer, so we're told. And I'm joined by Ryan McGinley at the Ryan McGinley on the X and Twitter handle. Ryan, it feels like ages since we've been together. How are you, fella? You good?
Things are good. Yeah, I feel like I'm really. I think having those couple of days back last week really helped me get back into the swing of things. We're right in the middle of the transfer window. There's ins, there's outs, there's pre-season games to talk about. It feels like we're all ramping up. We're ramping up quickly ahead of a big season ahead for Celtic. Looking forward to discussing it with you. How are you this morning, Tony? You all right?
I'm very well, sir. Very well. Thank you very much. That was my I'll let people into a secret. It's my birthday weekend, wasn't it, Ryan? Your old dad was 53 on Friday. They don't make mirrors the way they used to, Ryan. I tell you that, fella. Feeling every inch of 53 years old, indeed. But there you go. Some people say that is a young thing. Whatever. I am what I am, and I don't care about it. Anyway, I digress. Ryan, the world of Celtic never sleeps. Celtic had a game over the weekend, lost 3-2 to Australia in a training match, a closed doors match. Lots of people losing their marbles on social media about that, Ryan. I was just kind of a bit perplexed at some of the stuff that came out of that and the fallout from it.
Yeah, and just before we start, I'd like to say a good morning to everybody in the comments section as well. Hope everyone is doing well, whatever they're doing this summer, and thank you for joining us. You know, despite it being the summer, we've still got over 100, 150 people watching live at this point, and that figure is growing. So thank you so much to each and every one of you for joining in. Yeah, I've decided, or not decided, or I've learned to take the emotion away from pre-season games a long, long time ago. I was actually making the point to John on the post-match video that's available on the YouTube channel. I think the last time there was a great pre-season was 2009-2010 under Tony Mowbray. I think they won the Wembley Cup down in England at the Wembley Stadium, and we know how that season turned out. It was a training game. You know, there was plenty of minutes put into the legs of so many different players, a half each for most players. You had Cal McGregor playing 60 minutes. He looks like he's not slowing down anytime soon. Get those minutes into his legs. But most players got 45 minutes, a good run out against a top a top flight side in Australia, and they certainly showed that because they looked better than Celtic's two previous opponents, and that their league position would suggest that, playing in the Portuguese league, whereas you had Cork City playing in the Irish league and Queen's Park playing in the Championship. So there was that step up. It was a good training exercise, and I'm not really going to read too much into the result, to be honest.
Indeed, the manager said it was a really, really good exercise. I'll certainly go with what he says, Ryan. I usually do, and I kind of read between the lines in various things. But he also gave an interview to Celtic TV yesterday, didn't he? He spoke a lot about a lot of things. So first thing that immediately sprung to your mind, Ryan, was the Jota injury update. And here's what he said about Jota. He said he's coming along really well. We sent him to Portugal to assess his fitness here and be with his family. And yes, the progress has come along really well. I think the first 12 weeks of that injury, it's important that you get to a point where you're able to straighten it. He can do that. He has been in the gym, but he's got a long, long way to go, and it's going to be into next year. So, Ryan, we won't see Jota until 2026, whenever that may be in 2026. But I think we were all strapping ourselves in for a lengthy one with Jota and trying to hide back the tears and the emotion of all of that, weren't we?
Yeah, absolutely, and I didn't expect anything less, to be honest, considering the injury that he suffered. I think we all kind of knew when he went down at Tannadice that it was a bit of a serious injury. The concern in the players' faces. I know you were present at the game, Tony, but on the TV it looked as if there was a lot of concern both from the manager and the players towards the play, towards Jota, their teammate. He came back onto the pitch. He was wearing that brace. He was in crutches as well, so you knew that it was precautionary that they put the moon boot on him and the brace on him, but you expected it to be a longer diagnosis than more than anything else. You expect him to be out for the best part of a year, and that is going to be the case. The only thing is, and not to go too cliche on a Monday morning, Tony, it will feel like a new signing when he's back in the squad in January, February of next year. He's a talented player. I think I would just say that we need to be patient with him, even when he's coming back to this into the fold once he's fully fit, because these injuries, especially to the knee, they do sometimes change players. They take away from players a little bit for the first couple of months that they're playing. So I would urge patience from the supporters even when he does come back and play. But that's still a long time away, and I think it's all about the here and now and strengthening those wing positions ahead of a busy season for Celtic.
For me, he's back when he's back, Ryan. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
2026 it could be, February, it could be March, it could be April, it could be May. 2026, he's back when he's back, and I want him to be 100% at it when he's back and 100% fit. Don't want to take any unnecessary risks with him, because he missed out a lot of football, Ryan, before he came back, and he was building up his fitness levels, so that'll have set him back even more. So I just want 100% fit Jota when he comes back, whenever that date is in 2026. And I don't think the manager will be pressed on a date. We will find out in the fullness of time when that is. But as you say, Celtic have got more pressing matters on their mind. They do need to fill the wing positions. And nice wee segue into what we're going to talk about now in terms of wingers, because Yang's been linked with a move away, Ryan. Norwich City are the ones supposedly lining up a bid for Yang. Legia Warsaw have also made an inquiry, but I think Norwich certainly are interested, because they're seeking a replacement for Borja Sanz. So Yang, Ryan, he's had his moments in a Celtic jersey, but they've been pretty fleeting, and I think you would say he's been fairly inconsistent. Every now and again, he gives you something that you think, he could become a permanent presence in the team, and then he reverts to type. But Rodgers persevered with them for a while, didn't he? And as I say, he produced some kind of decent play. But I think it's fair to say that if Yang were to leave, I don't think the majority of the Celtic fans would be too perturbed about it, would they?
No, and especially considering the last time that they watched him in a competitive capacity was that final against Aberdeen. Yeah. And for want of a better phrase, it was a bit of a nightmare cameo from. I remember right at the end, he squandered a great opportunity to cross the ball into the box, and it actually went out of play. Me and you were both at the game at the same time, and not that the writing was on the wall, but it then becomes a lottery with the penalties, and you're like, if you take that chance and it doesn't go to penalties, and you're not in, it doesn't go to luck. I know Aberdeen took better penalties than Celtic on the day, and sometimes it isn't a lottery, and it's all about the quality from 12 yards. But Yang had an opportunity to really change that game, and I thought it was a very poor cameo from him. You said the right word as you were describing him. Moments. He's a moments player. He's only shown moments. He's not had any sort of real consistency in the hoops, and that's a problem for wingers, because you look at the guy that's just left, and I know that he's been inconsistent, especially in the second half of the season, but the proof is in the pudding with Nicholas Kuhn. Look at the double digits in goals and assists. Yang just doesn't have that. He doesn't have that in his resume or his CV. So if he is going to stay at Celtic, and the consistency has got to be shown this season, but I think with the wording in that report last night that Yang's representatives and his team around him are open to a move, would suggest that maybe his future does lie elsewhere, both for the player and for Celtic's best interests as well. My only worry is that they've not really been signing players for the wing position so far this window, and it sounds as if there's more wingers going out the way than in the way. We'll obviously go on to talk about Marco Tilio as well. You would hope that there'd be some movement in that regard in those positions to really strengthen, especially ahead of that massive Champions League qualifier at the end of next month.
I think, reading between the lines, Ryan, they've had that conversation. Brendan Rodgers maybe had the conversation with Yang and his representatives, and said to him, if you can guarantee first-team football elsewhere, it probably won't stand in his way, because he has given him a chance. And as you say, not judging him solely on the Scottish Cup final, but he's had numerous chances to shine in a Celtic jersey, and you've seen fleeting glimpses of what he can produce. But it's not enough for me. It's probably not enough for the manager. And I get what you're saying. There's a lot of movement in terms of wingers going out. Celtic do need another winger, don't they? That's imperative that they sign that. It's a big few days, or a couple of weeks coming up for Celtic in terms of the transfer market. They need numerous positions filled, but a winger is one of them, Ryan.
I've got to say, I'd put a plural onto that. I'd put an S at the end of whatever you're saying with regard to a winger. I think Celtic need at least two top quality wingers until Jota returns. I don't know if that would be in way of a loan deal, and then you look at your options in January, February once Jota's back. I think Celtic have got to cover themselves here as well. Jota isn't back until January, February time. They need players that are going to impact in the first team. They've just got the best part of 16, 17 million for Nicholas Kuhn. You're hoping that money is then reinvested into the squad and that the wings are sufficiently backed, because a lot of Celtic's goals will come from that. But Brendan Rodgers' style, it's been the same since his first spell at the club. In terms of wingers get goals for Celtic, you look at Sinclair in the first spell, you look at Patrick Roberts, you look at James Forrest. At this time, you had Lee Alabada at the first half of last season. You had Jota coming back scoring goals, Dyson Maeda, a couple of other players as well. You could add in Lewis Palma in his first season. Goals come from the wing positions in Brendan Rodgers' teams, so you would expect Paul Tisdale and his scouting team to be identifying players for Brendan Rodgers in order to make that a reality once again.
I think that's been the compare and contrast exercise, Ryan, with pre-season, this season and last season. At this point last season, everybody was enthusing because Kuhn looked the part. They were playing a style of football. Kyogo was scoring goals as well. And Celtic were beating Chelsea and Manchester City. And there was a real feel-good factor, which they took that momentum that they built. They took that into the season. And for the first 6 months of the season, Celtic were excellent. And it was no coincidence that Kuhn was a major part of that as well. I think it's been fairly low key this pre-season so far. That's not to say it won't burst into life over the course of the next week or so, and players will come in as well. So I think the Celtic supporters are just waiting for that spark, aren't they? Or that player to come in to give them that spark that kickstarts something. And as you say, and I banged on about it since the end of the Scottish Cup final, the Champions League qualifiers, Ryan, for me are, they're looming headlong into that, and Celtic cannot leave anything to chance for that double header, and it's crucial to me that they get in a winger. I know what you're saying. That was a conservative estimate for me in terms of a winger. I agree. A winger, open brackets, S, close brackets. Yeah,
Without doubt, Tony.
I still think they need a commanding left-sided centre back. Still think they need a centre forward, and I'd go as far as to say I still think they need a centre midfielder as well, Ryan. For me, that's in an ideal world, but I know we don't live in an ideal world, and I know Celtic are notoriously, when it comes to transfers, they're difficult. They find it difficult to get deals over the line.
Yeah, I would caveat that by saying this time last year, Celtic had only brought in, I think, one player, maybe two players at this time. But now it's different because you've got the looming reality of the Champions League qualifier. And I just don't think that Celtic can afford to gamble with that at all. I'm completely echoing what you're saying. I think they need the business done, because for me, their Champions League campaign starts in the middle of August. It doesn't start when the league phase, when the fixtures are announced for the league phase. They need to get in there. They need to make sure that when they're drawn against the team that they're going to be facing in that two-legged affair, that team aren't feeling confident about their chances, because Celtic have recruited well over the summer. They've brought in the big guns, and now they're ready for that qualifier. It's massive. For me, it's already Celtic's biggest game of the season because it stands for so much. And you go into the winter months as well, and you've got those Champions League games. I also think it's important for Celtic not to be playing Thursday nights as well with regard to the Europa League, because then you've got the Thursday-Sunday reality, and fixtures tend to pile up, and it doesn't work well for teams in any. But you look at a lot of teams, particularly down south, the way that they struggle with that Thursday-Sunday combo. Yes, I know you can get Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Sundays as well, but having that extra time to prepare, sort of rehab any injuries that you've got in those midweek games, build back up your fitness ahead of the weekend fixtures, I think that's massive. So despite it coming early on in the season, I think Celtic's two-legged affair against whoever they're playing against in the Champions League qualifiers is the biggest game of the season, or the biggest tie of the season for the club, and that their business should be done accordingly in order to make that challenge as less challenging as possible.
Ryan, for me, it's season defining, and the build-up starts now, and you have to treat every opposition and every time you go into that park as if you're playing a Champions League qualifier, because come the Champions League qualifier, you will know all about it. So for me, it started against Queen's Park, the build-up, or it should have, and I don't think certain players have covered themselves in glory in terms of looking ahead. I don't particularly care who Celtic draw in the Champions League qualifier. You have to play whoever it is. There's no avoiding that. So if you get the toughest draw in it, then I've been banging on about it for ages. You have to be ready. And there is no excuse, Ryan, for Celtic to be negligent in the transfer window and not be ready for this match. Because it is season defining. It's, because they were in the Champions League phase, there was an element of being relaxed and being able to play right up until that and knowing, and then having, they got, I don't know if it was a decent draw or not, you still had to play whoever they were drawn against. So, but that feel-good factor that they had built in pre-season just carried on, and I want that again. I don't see it at this minute in time. I think Celtic supporters are panicking about that. I'm not panicking per se, because I'm not one for the panic button, but I need to see something, Ryan, that tells me, right, this is where the momentum switches and Celtic are switched on and they're going to go embrace this Champions League qualifier and treat it with the reverence and respect it deserves. You cannot go into this half prepared. You just can't. I'm sorry.
The club have done that in the past, though, unfortunately. I've got to say that I think the recent transfer business over the past, maybe year and a half, I think it's been pretty good on the whole. The 2023 summer window was not good, but I think they had the Champions League money there ready to spend, and I think it was a bit of a scattergun approach. You see that with the amount of players, or the lack of players, that were signed in 2023 that aren't at the club, and Celtic have actually made a loss on a number of those players as well. I think the one positive, there's two positives for me, to be honest. John, me, you, Josh as well, we've all spoke about the same areas where Celtic need to improve and the areas that are in need of the most surgery. That's got to point out that it's obvious to the management and the scouts, those higher up at the club, that there's positions that clearly need identification of new targets and new signings. So if we can all see that, then you're hoping that Brendan Rodgers is closer to the players than anybody else. He's a man manager. He'll understand what he needs for the club. We've seen players leave the club that aren't up to standard. It's all about bringing in those players that are up to standard and pushing that standard up, so that the players that even some of the players that are there, that maybe are the standard just now, aren't the standard because you've upped it so high that those players don't compete with the new ones that you've brought in. That's the one positive. And I think the second one is that they've still got time. Time is still on their side ahead of this massive two-legged affair in the middle of August. Still got over a month until those games. But with every day that passes, with every morning briefing that we go on, with every pre-season game that we play, it's one step closer to those games. So you want the players in and ready and playing those pre-season games. I understand that negotiations can be tough with clubs, but for Celtic it's important that they get them in as soon as possible so that they're ready for these games, so that you're not throwing them in and expecting new players to immediately deliver. Yes, they've got players in the squad that can already do that job, that can already play in the Champions League, but you want those positions that have been strengthened by bringing in new personnel to immediately feel that benefit by playing in those games.
Yeah, without a doubt. And speaking of the manager, Ryan, he spoke about the contract situation, which is just going to rumble on, isn't it, all season and be picked at like a scab on your arm or leg or whatever. But this is what he said about the contract situation when he was asked. He said, yes, we spoke with all the guys. I had a meal and a chat around a number of things. So yes, I had a nice meet. We touched base on it, but primarily it's just a chat around things. Like I've said, I'm still a long, long way out. My focus is really just now getting the team ready and making us really competitive and exciting for this coming season. But a year's a long, long way out. I think I have to earn my place here at Celtic. That's what I felt when I came back, and it's no different. It wouldn't matter to me if it was 1 year, 1 week, or 10 years. I'd be super motivated to progress the team and keep us moving forward. Did you read anything into that, Ryan?
He said, I think maybe a year's a long way out for him personally, but I think it's a
Yes.
very short amount of time for Celtic's long-term planning, and I would want that sorted sooner rather than later for both the manager's sake, the players' sake, any new players coming into the squad that know that their manager's going to be there for the long term, or at least contractually there for the long term. I know that those contracts can be bought out by clubs. That's football. That's modern football. This is the way that football works nowadays. Your contract's worth about as much as the paper that is signed on. But it's so important for Celtic to get that sorted and sorted as soon as possible. As much as Brendan Rodgers is calm about the situation, I think there'd be a huge sense of relief if and when that contract is signed between the two parties to keep him there longer term, or at least longer term on paper. I think it's something that's got to be sorted out. Or if he is to leave the club, then I think that's got to be communicated as well. In an ideal world, of course, maybe that won't happen and it'll rumble on until the end of the season. But I think in an ideal world that would be sorted and everybody would know where everyone stands ahead of this new season. I'd just like this to be done before the season starts, but that's preferential thinking.
Indeed, Ryan, I think it's something that the longer it rumbles on, the more he's going to get asked. And it doesn't matter how many times he addresses it and he makes comments like that. It's only natural you're going to ask, are you going to sign a new deal? As you say, I think he thinks a year's a long time for him and it's further down the line. But I think for peace of mind, for a lot of supporters, they just want to know whether Brendan Rodgers is staying or going. And as I say, that's that uncertainty. It's the uncertainty, I think, that drives supporters crazy, isn't it? And as you say, it's for forward planning more than anything else. And that might be a difficult thing in terms of trying to recruit players, because if you're not committing to the cause in the club, then it's very hard to ask players to do the same, isn't it? To sign kind of, 3 and 5 year deals if they turn around and say, well, will you be here for that length of time? Or can you guarantee me that you'll be here? So I can understand that. I understand that deals take time as well. As I say, I'm not panicking now per se, but it's, Steve McGrory coming in saying Brendan isn't staying beyond this season. He just doesn't want to say so for fear of disrupting the team and the club. And there is that thinking as well. That's something that's lurking in the back of my head as well. There could be that element to it, Steve, but I think by not saying that, you're disrupting the club and the team.
I think it's a disruptive conversation regardless, and it's a disruptive situation to be in. Now, I know, and I've made this point earlier, that teams can buy out managers if they want them. It's different with Rodgers because he was on a 3-year contract. That rolling contract protects that was present with Ange Postecoglou and Rodgers before him and Lennon before him. That protected the manager as well as the club as well. But that 3-year deal, the fact that that there's an end period with that 3-year deal, for me, I would want it to be sorted sooner rather than later. I still think it's up in the air. I still think there's a good chance that he'll sign on and want to stay for the longer term, especially maybe with what looks like it's going to be a more improved league this season as well. Yeah. And I think Brendan Rodgers will appreciate that competition coming in the form of different teams, not just Celtic's greatest rivals, but I think Hearts are an improved outfit. Hibs are going to be an improved outfit. You just seen this weekend, Hibs spent £1 million on a striker. That shows you that there's money there. Aberdeen spending money on players too. It's going to be a strong league next season, and I think that'll suit Brendan Rodgers and motivate him to stay, for the fact that it's going to be a healthier landscape in Scottish football. It seems as if Scottish football's on the up at the moment, and I think that'll suit Brendan Rodgers in terms of his long-term planning as well.
I don't know about you, but I welcome that.
Without a doubt, me too.
A stronger Hearts, Hibs and Rangers, and I think it sharpens your own sensibilities and senses, or it should do. Make you want to prove again that you're the best team in the league, and I can't wait to put my wits against all these clubs again next season if they are going to be improved. Certainly on paper and from the outside looking in, some of them are tooling up to have a crack at you, and bring it on, Ryan. That's what I say. Bring it on.
And not just that, Tony, but I'm looking around Europe at the moment, every team seems to be improving in Europe, especially Champions League teams. I don't know if you took the time to watch the Club World Cup final yesterday, but look at Chelsea. Look at Chelsea now compared to what Celtic faced in one of their first games of
Yeah.
pre-season last season. I know they've spent a lot of money, but look at PSG as well. They're improving teams. Every year, these teams are going to get better, and that gap is just going to widen unless Celtic do their best to try and identify better players and push that needle and move the needle just a little bit more in terms of their transfers. I think the new norm for Celtic has got to be bringing in £5-6 million players at a minimum now. I think the due to inflation and due to what players are asking for and teams are asking for, I think they've got to move that needle ever so slightly and bring in quality rather than quantity. I think the days of the £1-2 million project players has got to be over if Celtic are to remain serious in the Champions League. They did well last season. There was inroads made in the Champions League, but I do think that the needle has got to be moved transfer-wise in order to keep that improvement going in Europe's biggest stage, biggest club stage.
It's the only way you'll improve on that stage, Ryan, is to do what you've just said there. But that's something that we've all been crying out for a long time and capitalise when you did make an impression in the Champions League. And Celtic did make an impression in the Champions League last season. I'm always that I want to be in the Champions League, like you. Don't want to be playing on a Thursday night. And so we got to the playoff round for the last 16 last season. Cannot get to the last 16 or last 8, but that means bringing in a calibre of player that can take you there, and the manager knows that, and those upstairs should know that. I keep saying that, Michael Nicholson and Dermot Desmond were there that night in Munich. In order to have more nights like that and maybe turn that into a win, then you have to back this manager. You have to give him the tools to do the job. You have to bring in a calibre of player. You were saying the 6 million bracket. Why not? They tell you, they repeatedly tell you that the financial wherewithal is there. And I've said before, if you're successful in the European stage, then domestic success follows. It's, and I can't for life of me understand why Celtic cannot be successful on both of those fronts. But you have to prepare yourself to be that. And I think the Celtic board have been guilty in the past of not preparing Celtic to be successful on that stage. And you look around and you hope that history's not repeating itself. Still time. I agree with you. There's still time to do a lot of business and to do something about that. But I just don't want them to leave. I said after the Scottish Cup final, you cannot leave anything to chance with this Champions League qualifiers, because they are and will be the most important game that Celtic play in many a year. You have to go into that fully armed and fully prepared and ready to qualify for the league phase again.
Yeah, and it's likely that Celtic will face a team that are better than Aberdeen. In fact, I think it's guaranteed that Celtic will face a team that's better than Aberdeen in these Champions League qualifiers, because they could come up against a team, or probably will come up against a team, that has went through other qualifiers against lesser sides in order to get to this position. So they've got to improve. I just don't think they can afford to have those £8, £9, £10 million signings after they qualify for the Champions League. I think they've got to speculate to accumulate. Everybody knows that Celtic are in a healthy financial situation, and in order to improve and make sure that Champions League game is as stress-free as possible, you bring in the players that are going to impact the Champions League proper by bringing them in earlier and playing them in that qualifier, because if nothing else, it's a good preparation for these players to understand the pressures of playing for Celtic in the Champions League, with that expectancy that, this could be one of the only games that Celtic are seen as favourites against the team that they're coming up against in qualifying. So that's a different dynamic. These players have got to be used to that. It's all about the luck of the draw once you get into the proper rounds of the Champions League. But in order to get there, you need to negotiate that two-legged tie, and the sooner they bring in the players that are going to impact that game, the better for me. Yes, they brought in Kieran Tierney. Somebody in the comments was saying that he was brought in cheaply. That's an exception for me, because it's Kieran Tierney and he wants to go back to his boyhood club and play for the team that he supports and loves, and he's taking a financial hit in order to make that a reality. That won't happen with every player, because not every player has a personal connection with the club. So you're going to have to spend the money to bring in players of his quality that that don't have that tie with Celtic.
Completely agree with that. That's we will speak about the same issue, no doubt, Ryan, in the next few days and coming weeks, about players coming in, players leaving. It is what it is. It's the close season, or the pre-season, and everybody, the Celtic have a funny way of tempering your excitement at times, don't they? You get really excited because things are ramping up. Wednesday night's going to ramp up again, Ryan. They're playing Sporting Lisbon. I'll be interested to see what team the manager puts out against Sporting Lisbon, because it might resemble something close to what might start the season, Ryan.
Mm-hmm. I was actually talking about this with John, and John suggested that it was a 45-minute game. I think it might be more akin to a 60-30 in terms of minutes. You might see the starting team play 60. Or maybe it might be that 45-45, because you've got the Newcastle game this weekend as well, which will be, I think both Sporting Club and Newcastle, they're both top sides. I think the two of them can play in the Champions League next season as well, so it's a real step up in opposition. Then you've got the Como Cup against Ajax, and whoever and whatever transpires in that first game then goes to the second game, whoever they play, whoever wins and loses, etc. But there's that step up now. Celtic are done with the sort of I don't want to call them lesser games, but from here on in, there is a step up in quality, and you'd hope that Celtic can up their game accordingly in order to match those teams. One thing I would say though is Sporting Club will go in particularly significantly weaker, with the fact that their top striker looks to be heading to Arsenal, Victor Gyökeres. It seems as if that's all set to be announced in the coming days, so Celtic don't need to worry about coming up against him, who seems to be one of the most fearsome strikers in Europe at the moment. So still going to be a tough opposition, but significantly weaker without the Swedish international leading the line for them.
Wednesday night, Ryan, 7:30 kickoff, I believe. Is that right?
Yep. And Faro, I believe. So it's going to be an interesting game, a real step up in quality. Looking forward to watching that game. Sporting Club, a really, really well-run club. They always get really good transfer fees, maybe something that Celtic should look to replicate or try to replicate, but I understand that the Portuguese league's far better than the Scottish league, and that's the reason why they can get such fees for players. But good side to come up against, will pose a difficult challenge, will pose a step up in quality, but excited to see the likes of Kieran Tierney, Benjamin Nygren again as well. These are players to look forward to, and hopefully they can be part of a long-term success story at Celtic.
Yeah, indeed. We'll call it a day there, but just before we go, I'd just like to draw your attention to the fact I was in Ireland last week, and the last of my 3 articles that I put up on the site went up yesterday, and it's about I travelled to Dahoma, which is the birthplace of John Keane, who is the man who put the £1 million in 1994 to save Celtic from going into administration. He's rightfully credited as being one of the men who helped save Celtic, and so I travelled to his hometown, spoke to a few people who knew him best, and I've written a piece on the website which you can read, and because we knew all about John Keane's actions and deeds and what he did, Ryan, but we didn't know the man, so this gives you a flavour of the man and what he did back home, and you can have a look at that. I've put it in the comment section, but I really enjoyed that. It was worthwhile doing, and I'm very proud of that, and it was a pleasure and an honour and a privilege to go there, and as I say, just sort of get a greater picture of that story, Ryan, of a wonderful man, a humble Irishman who rightfully, as I say, is one of the men who helped save Celtic. So have a read at that, guys. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, without a doubt, I would point everybody to that article, and it's important that Celtic remember their Irish traditions as well and their Irish history, because it's important. It's the reason why the club was founded, because Irish immigrants came over to Scotland, and it was to put food on the tables of those in poverty. Celtic are a charitable organisation. You would hope that would still be the case, and as the case with the work that the foundation do. It's important that Celtic keep with those traditions as well, and look out for those that are less fortunate. But yeah, a great story from yourself, and I would recommend it to everybody on the website. It's available on the website, and it's doing really well, numbers wise too. So please give it a look on the Celtic Way website if you can.
Appreciate that. Ryan, thank you. Another stellar contribution today. We'll be back to do it all again tomorrow with a combination of two of us, Ryan, whoever that may be. We'll keep you in suspense and surprise. But no doubt we'll be talking about the same things. We'll be building up to the Sporting Lisbon game. Hopefully, maybe get a signing today, Ryan. Are you hopeful of that?
I'm not sure about today. I've not heard. There's definitely things happening in the background. There's constant development being done and work being done in the background to bring in new players, but I'm not sure about today. I would be surprised today, maybe later on in the week, for any potential signings. But you never know. Celtic could spring a surprise and bring in and announce a player today. But I'm sure there's a lot of work getting completed and finalised in the background in order to bring in the new talent for the new season.
Guys, thanks very much. Over 600 people joining us in our live stream. Really appreciate the numbers. Really appreciate you guys subscribing to all forms of media on the channel, the YouTube channel, subscribing to the website as well. Lots of stuff on there for you to peruse at your leisure. But thanks very much, Ryan. Take care, and we'll see you all again tomorrow, same time.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.